It's the final case that's going to ask the question, is monetary bail constitutional? Are bail schedules constitutional? This is the last one.
I don't personally. I think the right to bail is a fundamental constitutional right, and that's what voters in California told us is they want to keep it.
People didn't want to give up their right to bail. They didn't, and it really wasn't about the defendant. It was about the defendant's friends and family.
So I think the Georgia legislature is reacting. I think some of the other states have been slow to react. But as you said, I think the pendulum is swinging, and the question is it going to swing too far, perhaps? Well, I think in light of what happened in California, the rejection of Proposition 25 and the no money bail system by voters is that voters want to keep their right to bail.
So I know the truth, which is that bail is a core associational and constitutional right. We have generational mass incarceration. I don't think anybody can say that we don't. And how to solve that, I think, is the question. But
you're going to be sitting there for perhaps up to a year, and that's a problem if you're innocent. But I think that's what the federal example of this shows. The federal system that they're copying is that it is a march toward mass incarceration, because they will always err on the side of denying bail.
They changed the state constitution to give prosecutors the power to detain people without bail at all.
The original design of what we were trying to do went too far and relied too heavily on preventative detention. I think we give short shrift to victims' rights in bail. I think that's changing as a result of Marcy's Law and some of these other laws that are coming into effect, victims having a right to be heard.
The staff of the committee pointed out that the zero bail and binding judicial discretion is a problem, and that we need to take this danger to the community into account when setting bail and not take that tool away from judges.
5% of defendants commit 60% of the crimes in this country. So the judges know who they are. We need to let them do their job.
And the reaction from the Attorney General was, we need to detain more people who are dangerous to stop these repeat criminals.
Well, I think it's absolutely going to increase pretrial crime, which means crime while people are out on bail. And I think people aren't going to show up for trial, which means victims aren't going to get justice. So it's really going to grind the system to the halt.
Our police need to go and enforce the law. And unfortunately, that's what deters crime. We can't incarcerate our way out of this, right? We have to tell the public that if you commit a crime, you're going to pay the punishment. And that's the number one thing that we need to do.
Certainly these risk computers have come under scrutiny recently. They are counting prior felons in possession of firearms as low risk. And so I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done on these risk assessment computers if we think it's going to replace human judgment.
Well, the big concern is that it's racially biased. Is one big concern. I think the other one is it just doesn't work. It lets out high-risk people. It just doesn't make any sense.
The other thing is these things, and we've seen this, they overpredict dangerousness of African-American and Hispanic defendants, period.
I think when the legislators start coming in and saying, these group of people are the bad people and these group of people are the good people, or using a risk assessment to distinguish between people, is where we get into problems. And I think judges just need to look at people.
Computer would have decided whether you get out or not whether you have support in the community and somebody to vouch for you, which is what, has been the history of the bail system. Well, I think the Crime Commission needs to call on the counties to stop using the tool. They've got to stop it right now. You can't do any more damage. I think their whole thing that end cash bail just begs the question, and then what? What type of system do we want? What would we replace it with? And that's where things get fuzzy for the Bail Project and others. In this case, there's no oversight because there's no regulation. They're basically acting as a bail bondsman, but not for profit. But there's no regulation whatsoever in the state of Minnesota and everywhere else except for New York State. Their policy is they go in and pick file numbers. And that's scary. That's a game of criminal Russian roulette. Well, it's got to be violent criminals because that's all that's left. There's nobody left. There's no peaceful protesters for them to spend this kind of money on.
What we found out yesterday was that in Portland, the charities posted the defendants' cash and then defendants are keeping it when they get it back.
Because if you have a multiple time convicted felon who gets out on a free bail in the District of Columbia, for example, and takes off, there's nobody to go get them. It's not just crime. It's just that people aren't showing up for court, and thus they're not getting convicted, and thus we're not deterring people from doing it again. Yeah, keep in mind that 60% of violent crimes in cities is committed by 3 to 5% of defendants. Those are the ones we need to be hard on. Innocent people are in jail and they sit there for too long, and they're only exonerated. That's a waste of taxpayer resources. The time to disposition in the District of Columbia has doubled.
We've supported any number of pieces of legislation over the years, like making the bail schedules more fair.
So they're selling the bill as though it's just a misdemeanor bill, but it's really not. We're telling police you can arrest somebody, but we're telling a judge, well, you can't keep them in jail after the fact. And I think that's a problem.
Arrest warrants could go out every time too. So these people could be rearrested numerous times, only to then be released, of course, because the judges can't do a bail. Case has gone forward. The first numbers that I saw, the failure to appear in court had nearly doubled as a result of not utilizing bail, because you got to keep in mind the order is in place right now of the judge. There's no injunction, so we'll wait to see what happens.
I think it would effectively end all monetary conditions of bail in the 11th Circuit. And what these lawyers are trying to do is create a circuit split to try to get a pathway to the U.S. Supreme Court.
As is, I think there's no bail industry in California under this bill. We've been fighting, the same group of senators for the last 6 years that are bent on proceeding forward in a fashion that's just really not good for California.
Because the point is, people just need to pay their debt. They need to pay restitution. They need to take care of what they've done. And that's really what the criminal system should be designed for. And
Well, yeah, because nobody's going to show up in court if we don't have a system of detention like the federal system where we're locking a bunch of people up.
well, the part of the New Jersey system that's good is cite and release on low-level nonviolent misdemeanor cases. And that's what's driving those numbers. And one public defender said, if you want to understand the bad side of what's going on in bail reform, is follow the money. So we have absolutely over-criminalized ourselves, and we rely too heavily on incarceration. There's no doubt about that.
We've advocated for improving due processes, so when poor individuals can't afford their bail, they can get in front of a judge faster and get alternatives.
In a lot of small towns throughout the South, you're seeing delays of 5, 10, 15 days, and that's just plain too long.
If you don't like the idea that somebody can't post a bail and stay in jail, that's a backdoor that one might call sub rosa detention. But why create a front door and allow the state to overtly incarcerate people who are presumed innocent?
And sometimes the family doesn't want to bail them out because they have a severe substance use disorder and they're afraid that they'll die if they're released. And so those issues are every day, and I think it's a bigger problem than people want to admit.